The First Tycoon is the biography of Cornelius Vanderbilt, the man who made his fortune in railroads and shipping and at one time was considered the world's richest man. Speaking of Vanderbilt, his biographer Stiles wrote, he did have his beliefs, chiefly in his own genius. Hello, I'm Ramesh Damani, welcoming you back to a brand new episode of Wizards of the Street. Belief in free markets is, of course, a cornerstone of investing genius. My guest today has an MBA from Vanderbilt University. He's done stints at State Street Global Advisors and spent 17 years at Goldman Sachs in a variety of key positions. Since 2017, he is the founder and MD of WhiteOak Capital Management with over $6 billion in assets under management. Please help me welcome Prashant Khemka. Prashant, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Rameshji. It's a pleasure to be here.
Prashant, I want to go back to your early years. What got you interested in the stock market?
Certainly. So as a child, Rameshji, I grew up in a middle-class Marwadi family. My father,
Like I did too.
My father had a store, a garment store, and all our savings, my grandfather's as well, were invested in stock market. Odd lots, minimum lots, received an IPO allocation, some 150 of those. So while we were, as I said, maybe middle class, we were surrounded, my friends and neighbors and relatives were mostly far wealthier. So always was wondering how to make money and more money. So I was reading books like Think and Grow Rich.
By
and
Napoleon Rich, yes.
Yes, absolutely. So around in 1985, July 1985, my great-grandmother had passed away. And as was customary that time, extended family would get together for 12 days as a ritual. And everyone was talking about how they're making a killing in equities.
That was the Rajiv Gandhi bull market.
Rajiv Gandhi's bull market, yeah. So they doubled, quadrupled in Tata Ordinary, Tata Locomotive and Century and No-Sill and Baroda Rayon and so on. So I felt like a eureka moment. This is how I can double my money every year.
And make your family wealthy.
Absolutely. And but how 5,000 can grow to a crorepati.
Right. But a lot of people influenced you in your life. I know your granddad was a big influence on your life. Goldman Sachs clearly was a great influence on your life. What are the enduring lessons you learned from some of the people who've helped you in your journey to become the MD of WhiteOak?
No, absolutely. It is, the lessons learned from my interactions with various people over this since, as you said, from grandfather, for example, learned that it's impossible to predict the market. In college, you talked about Vanderbilt. Really, first time I realized that it's a cash flow based analysis that's most powerful in determining value.
Not necessarily earnings or EV to EBITDA.
Absolutely. So until then, I was using all those price to work, price to earnings and so on. But that was the revelation at Vanderbilt in the mid-90s when I realized and have completely switched to cash flow based approach. Then under my boss, Herb Ehlers in 2000 at Goldman, really learned how to conduct professional research. Until then, it was more of a retail investor style. Then as someone who started GSAM in India, learned how to build teams and establish strong investment culture. Had the opportunity to invest globally in developed markets at US growth equity team at Goldman, and also in managing the emerging markets business. So that exposed me to business models and business environment in so many countries around the world, from Mexico to Korea.
A lot of emerging markets.
Absolutely. And here at WhiteOak, for the first time, the experience of owning and running a business has been tremendously insightful, because so far was only investing in businesses without necessarily appreciating what goes on in the promoters or owners mind as they're running the businesses. So it has been all along.
I understand that. Your granddad, of course, taught you that you cannot predict the future. Good advice. But he also made you do summaries of balance sheets?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's how, his way of teaching me. He'll, when good old days, you remember, annual reports would come. Even if you have one share of any company, the annual reports would come, physical copies. So he'll ask me always to summarize any new annual report that will come. He'll say, summarize for me, what is the management saying? What are the numbers looking like? And all that. So that was very, very helpful lesson in those days.
But despite the summary, in the 92 bull market, the so-called Harshad Mehta bull market, you had a pretty bad ending, didn't you?
Absolutely. So we were not just myself, but two of my friends. We borrowed money, a lakh rupees each, which was quite a lot of money
Princely
for
sum, yeah.
college students at the time, and they entrusted it to me because they thought I was a investing genius, and we ultimately ended up losing all the money, more or less all the money.
Fair enough, but did that discourage you from equities? Because here's a somewhat of a thieves' den that you get Ford certificate. Why not stick to retail, which is what your family calling was?
Well, I think the fascination with markets was too strong to have been discouraged by losses. I mean, since then I've had other substantial losses as well in almost every bubble bust, because as I've mentioned before, I don't try to time at any time the markets. I'm fully invested
At all times,
at all
okay.
times throughout. So there were substantial losses, but I've never lost a night's sleep on those losses, and never thought of, because I don't know of anything else to do since I've been hooked onto the
No plan
markets.
B.
No plan B. Until the age of 13, I wanted to be captain of Indian cricket team, but since then, I've been hooked to the equities.
I think we all do. Prashant, you went to America to get an MBA from Vanderbilt University, storied university. Why Vanderbilt and what did you learn there?
Certainly. So see, why Vanderbilt? Initially, obviously, the uh, at that time didn't have the money to pay, first of all,
Of
for an
course.
MBA education. So the primary selection criteria, to be honest, was only colleges that would give me scholarship. Yeah. And then within that set, look for which one had the best finance education. So Vanderbilt ranked very high. The faculty at Vanderbilt in finance was very strong, and they offered me full scholarship. So complete. It's a private institution. All my tuition was waived off, and even was given an opportunity to work with a professor at twice the regular pay, which helped me pay off my living expenses as well. And in fact, the professor then recommended me for the first job at State Street, which I received, and was the beginning of my career.
Which is lovely, of course, that you worked for a university that made the first tycoon in business, and now you follow tycoons for a living. Uh, you worked at State Street, and then you were recruited by Goldman Sachs. Not an easy job to get for an immigrant. How were you recruited, and tell me about your years at Goldman Sachs?
Definitely. So there was a alumni again from alum from Vanderbilt University who was working at Goldman, who referred me to this very high performing team, U.S. growth equity team, based out of Tampa, Florida, founded by Herb Ehlers. Goldman had acquired Liberty Asset Management that was founded by Herb Ehlers. So he forwarded my CV to him. I went to interview as was customary. I had dozen odd rounds of interviews, and was very fortunate to have been offered that position. And later on, and I still stay in very close touch with Herb. In a couple of weeks' time, would be having our usual annual catch up. And when I asked him why did he hire me, he told me basically because of your enthusiasm for investing, and the
The
fact that you've
passion.
been absolutely the passion and enthusiasm, and the fact that you've been investing since very early days, and it was very apparent in talking to you that's what you want to do for the rest of your life, and that was the key reason that he brought me on.
That's fascinating. But what does it Goldman teach you? I mean, this is a very hard-driven work culture. Sometimes you work 18 hours a day. Sometimes you don't have any weekends. Was there any work-life balance that you got out there? What and how did you learn to invest at Goldman?
Certainly. So see, Goldman is a giant organization with various divisions, and the different divisions have their own, style and all.
Fiefdoms.
Fortunately, at in Goldman Sachs Asset Management, each team ran like a boutique of its own, and there was no enforced approach top down, which is very good. And so, in this U.S. growth equity team under Herb's leadership, he ran it as his ship, his boutique firm, which he had founded. So I learned a lot, as I said, the professional research, how to conduct management meetings, how to source for ideas, present and convince to the broader team, then how to manage portfolios when I was given those responsibilities. Um, and from Herb in particular, I learned how to build strong teams, keep them motivated all the time, um, and how to be a very meritocratic leader, which has then helped me over time as I built my own teams over there. So the most important lesson during the early Goldman days were to observe Herb and his leadership style. Yeah? And then in later years, as I
Emulate
established,
that.
sorry,
Later years emulate that.
emulate that as well. And so, as I got the opportunity to build the GSAM India team initially, and then now WhiteOak team, so those observations were very helpful.
But tell me, 98, 2000, maybe you joined Goldman Sachs at the peak of some dot-com bubble, and you were running US equities at that time, maybe for a decade or so. At that time, did you look at the Indian markets, or you only focused on American markets at that time?
No, no, absolutely. My daytime job was managing clients' money, investing that in US. But in the evening, when I would come back home, I'd log in and follow and be investing in Indian markets, particularly while I was at State Street. Yeah, because at Goldman, it took me some time to get all the approvals and compliance approvals and permissions from all the way to the top to have the brokerage account here, which I did get in 2003, 2004 timeframe. But I continuously followed the Indian markets all throughout.
That's fascinating. You're at the high octane market of the US. It bounced back from the dot-com bubble at some point. Uh, India still, by 99, 2000, you barely had one company listed on NASDAQ, which was Infosys. What was your interest in, what kept your heart beating about India?
Or India, certainly. So, see, always was sure I was coming back to India and was starting an investment management firm in India. So that was never
You
in
knew
doubt.
that when you give up the dream of being a cricket captain, that's what you want to do.
Very much so. So never ever doubted that. So I had to maintain that connect, and not just had to maintain. That was a passionate connect. That would have been there in any case.
What we'll do is we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll chat some more about your returns and how to profit from the Indian stock market with Prashant Khemka of WhiteOak.